make sure that you watch the video of the Kenny Genovese case posted on Canvas. This case inspired the theories and research of Latney and Darley in the 1970s. Latney and Darley were struck by the news coverage that multiple neighbors heard Kitty's cries for help and yet did nothing. Reporters were framing this as a cultural crisis in New York, that the people of New York had become so callous and cold that they couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone and call the police to save a neighbor's life. But Latney and Darley had a different explanation. Many of the neighbors questioned reported that they thought, I know other people can hear her cries for help. I'm sure someone else has already called the police. Therefore, I don't need to call because someone has also heard her and someone has already called the police. This led to the conceptualization of the bystander effect. The argument was that it wasn't something internal, their individual callousness that caused them not to help, but rather it was a property of the situation that produced a lack of intervention in this emergency scenario. Latney and Darley posited that diffusion of responsibility was to blame. According to diffusion of responsibility, as the number of witnesses or bystanders increases, each individual within the crowd feels less individually, personally responsible for helping. So if only one person witnesses an emergency, then the responsibility for helping is concentrated solely on that one person, and they feel compelled to intervene. But if we have a large crowd, then that responsibility is diffused across the entire crowd, and each individual person within that crowd feels less individually compelled to act. And so, of course, we can't rely on conjecture or even the details of a single real-world case, like the Genovese case. So Darley and Latney set up an experimental laboratory test of this effect. Participants were led to believe that they would be taking part in a group discussion. They were told that in order to help them focus on the content of the discussion, the researchers were removing visual cues. So each member of the discussion group would be separated in an individual cubicle, and they would be communicating via an intercom system. Participants would then be seated in their cubicle, and during the course of the discussion, they would hear over the intercom a man say, "I'm having a seizure," and our participant would hear him begin to choke. And so the question is, does our participant help? Do they run out of their cubicle to find help or to find the man who is having a seizure? Or instead, do they remain seated and remain in their cubicle? The independent variable is the perceived size of the group. Participants were randomly assigned to conditions in which they were led to believe that they were in groups of varying size. So some participants were randomly assigned to the condition in which they were told there are only 2 members of this discussion group. And so these participants believed that it was just them and the guy having the seizure, who were linked via the intercom system. Some participants were randomly assigned to the group size of 3. So they believed that it's them, the man having a seizure, and one other person, right, who's also linked via intercom, who can hear all of this, or that they're part of a group size of 6. So it's our participant, it's the guy having a seizure, and 4 other people who are linked via the intercom system who hear the same thing as our participant. Right? And so we're looking at what percentage of bystanders attempt to help, leave their cubicle, go try to find someone or try to find the man. And also, if they do help, how long does it take them to make that decision to help? right? How long is it before they leave the cubicle to go try to get help? And what our researchers found was that as the perceived group size increased, the likelihood that our participant attempted to help decreased, and if they did, it took them longer to do so. Right? So just as we would expect based on the bystander effect or diffusion of responsibility, that as the number of perceived witnesses to this emergency situation increases, the likelihood that our participant individually feels compelled to act is decreasing. The likelihood that they act is decreasing. And when they do, this is kind of shocking, it takes them longer to make that decision. So even if they help, this increase in the number of perceived bystanders or witnesses is leading to a delayed response. And from a real world perspective, we can think about how crucial that is. If we have emergency situations that require quick action, any amount of delay before someone intervenes or acts could have very dramatic and drastic consequences for that individual who is in need of help. And so keep in mind in our study, the entire thing was scripted and pre-recorded, so there wasn't a guy actually having a seizure. No one's health or safety was really in jeopardy. But the idea is that if we translate this to a real world scenario, that very well could be the case, right? And that minutes may mean everything if someone is not intervening, or even if they are, if it's taking them longer to do so. And so really the argument here is that we have to look beyond personality. So we can look at individual differences in empathy and altruistic personality. We could look at individual differences in callousness, but that we also have to look at these situational barriers essentially to helping, and some of these social psychological processes that operate in the context of groups and social situations or settings that can reduce the likelihood that people intervene in emergency situations to help others, or that if they do, that we have a delayed response. And so this diffusion of responsibility is just one of many factors that could influence the likelihood of a bystander or witness intervening and lending aid in an emergency situation. And in fact, if we expand out, we have an entire model for bystander intervention that includes a number of factors. And so you can see here why we may find low rates of helping or intervention in emergency situations in general, because we have to essentially make it through each of these 5 points before we intervene and offer help. And that at any stage in this process, at any of these 5 points, we could have a breakdown in the model that leads to no intervention, no help. And so our diffusion of responsibility is just one step. And if you notice that that's step 3, so we have 2 steps before we even get to that stage of assuming responsibility to intervene. Our first step is pretty simple and straightforward, but incredibly crucial in this model. It's simply noticing the event, simply noticing that an emergency is occurring, right, or in progress, and that there's a situation that requires our intervention or our help, that someone is in need of our help. And most of us think, well, of course, that would be easy to identify. But there are a number of situational and social factors that could decrease the likelihood that we even notice that someone is in need of our help, or even notice that an emergency situation is occurring. And so let's look at what's often called the Good Samaritan study. Darley and Batson in 1973 hypothesized that something as simple as being in a hurry could reduce the likelihood that a witness intervenes to come to someone's aid or assistance. And so it's called the Good Samaritan study because that was one of the topics that was given to participants. All participants were seminary students, and they were led to believe that the purpose of the study was to record speeches. And we have half of our students who are told, you should prepare a speech about professional problems that you are likely to face, professional challenges that you may face in the future. The other half of participants are told, we want you to prepare a speech about Luke's parable of the Good Samaritan. Participants were told that they would deliver their speech to a researcher who would record it via videotape. They were told that the recording devices were set up in a room in a building across campus. So we have a recording studio all set up for the purposes of this research. They're going to record you giving a speech, but all of that is set up across campus. And this is where our researchers manipulate the second independent variable. So our first independent variable was the topic of the speech that they are told to prepare and that they are led to believe that they would deliver. The second independent variable was the time pressure manipulation. So they're all told, all right, prepare your speech as you walk across campus, right, to the recording studio. Some of our participants are randomly assigned to the early condition. So they are told, we are actually over here running a bit ahead of schedule. They're a little bit behind in the recording studio across campus. So take your time. And when you get to the room across campus, just be prepared. You may have to wait a little bit before they are ready for you, but please just be patient with us. Some of our other participants are randomly assigned to the on-time condition. So they are told things are running like clockwork, right? We're right on time here. Make your way across campus. As soon as you get to the room, just walk right in. They should be ready for you. And then some of our participants are randomly assigned to the late condition, which they are told, we're running a little bit behind over here. And the people across campus in the recording studio are already waiting on you. If you could try to hurry and get there as quickly as you can so that things don't get kind of further behind schedule. Right, so we have different time pressures. The perception that I will be early, I have plenty of time to make my way across campus, right? The on time, you know, as soon as I get there, I should be able to walk right in, versus the high time pressure, the late condition, which I think I have to hurry, right? And get to the recording studio because they're already waiting on me. So I need to be quick about this. So all of our participants leave, they walk across campus. Along the way, the researchers have staged a kind of fake emergency situation, someone who may be potentially in need of help. It's a guy who's slumped over by the sidewalk, who's on the ground and moaning. When our participants get across campus and walk into the recording studio, rather than delivering their speech, they are simply asked, did you help the man along the way, right? And so our dependent variables of interest here are, did they help, right? And we have people stationed to see, you know, and we know our Confederate will be able to report, did they actually help or not, right? So the question is, did they help? Right? And we can also kind of look at, well, maybe what is their explanation if they did not help? And we can make a couple of different predictions here. One prediction is that the first manipulation would matter a great deal, the topic of the speech, because we would think that if someone is primed with this idea of the Good Samaritan, if that's what they're thinking about, they would think I should be a Good Samaritan, right? And help someone when I see them slumped over moaning, right? I should stop and see if they need help. Or we might predict that simply being in a hurry, this time pressure manipulation would matter more. And that's actually what the researchers found, was that what very clearly mattered was this time pressure manipulation. And so those who were under the high time pressure, they perceived that they were late, were significantly less likely to help compared to those in the low pressure condition. So we have only 10% helping who thought that they were late versus those who thought that they were early, right, and had all the time in the world. We have 63% in that particular condition that are helping. And so these very dramatic differences. And so the question is, okay, well, what's going on here? Okay. And we may think, well, those who thought that they were late are just saying, oh no, I don't have time for this, right? I can't help this guy. I'm in a rush. But actually what the researchers found was that when they asked the participant, did you help that man along the way? Those who are in this late high time pressure condition said, what man? And think about it, when we're in a rush, we get kind of this tunnel vision, right? We have to stay focused. We're in a hurry. We have places to go, right? We have this tunnel vision. We're not kind of casually walking across campus, taking time to smell the roses, right? And so the argument here, the explanation for their effects is that those who were under the high time pressure, who perceived that they were late, simply didn't even notice that they passed someone who was in need of help. Right? And so it's the situational factor that influenced the likelihood of helping. That we had a breakdown right here at this first step, that those who were under time pressure, who thought that they were late, who were in a hurry, failed to notice that there was a potential emergency.